Hello, and welcome to Live Like the World is Dying, which is a YouTube show. And most YouTube shows don't have introductions like this, but I'm really used to doing podcasts, and podcasts do have introductions like this. So that's what's going to be. Today, I'm going to take you inside my off-grid house and talk to you about off-grid life and talk about some of the systems that are involved in making off-grid life palatable, including water and power and heat and things like that. The very first thing that I want you to know about off-grid life is that off-grid life sucks. It's shitty. It's not as good as on-grid life. For one thing, it's not as ecologically sustainable. Well, I probably live more ecologically sustainable than the average person who lives in a giant house. When you decentralize everything, you end up decentralizing things that are better off centralized, especially like a power grid. A power grid is able to send power where it's being used and not where it's not being used. Unlike off-grid life, where you have to do battery storage, and battery storage is not actually an ecologically sustainable thing. So my house, it's a 12-foot by 12-foot footprint of a house with 16-foot rafters. It's an A-frame. A-frames are really cool. People are like, I love triangles. I talk about triangles all the time. And people are like, oh, wow, a triangle. It's so strong. It's easy to build. This is true. It's the easiest way to build a strong house is to build a triangle house because triangles are known for not falling over. However, as we get inside, you'll see that that means that you have to custom build every single piece of furniture, and it is not a good way to maximize usable space. I think people have a lot of misconceptions about this is how we're all going to be living. This is not how we're all going to be living. This is not how we all should be living. Off-grid life is not the solution to climate change, or even probably whatever problems you're having in your personal life. You probably don't want to live like this. There are some things about it that I like. I like the fact that I have to keep track of how much power I use. You can't treat resources as infinite on a finite planet. A lot of the fantasy about getting off grid and getting back to nature and stuff is just that, a fantasy. Most people who do it end up leaving it. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, those people aren't tough enough. No, those people are probably smarter. They're probably smarter than me that they got back on grid. So let's talk about water. Water is an important part of life. People say that all the time, and they're correct. Now, most people assume off-grid life equals rainwater catchment. Most people are right. In most situations, you want to use rainwater catchment. But my house doesn't use a rainwater catchment because I built a goddamn A-frame. The roof goes all the way to the ground. And the thing about water is you want it higher than where you use it. So I could build rainwater catchment. I even have some of the basic stuff in place. I have a gutter, and the gutter goes down into that little buddy, into that little corrugated tube. And that corrugated tube goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. Ding. And that does not catch rain. If I wanted to catch rain, I would have to put the thing all the way down the hill. There's no specific one way to live off grid. Hooray, imagine that. Okay, and my way is that I live close enough to a friendly neighbor that I am able to tap their well. That means I go run a garden hose attached to this incredibly long PEX tube that runs through the forest for a long way. Then I fill up this 150 gallons, and that'll last me personally about a month. Sometimes when you hang out in the forest, you start looking at all the little weird wriggly creatures that live in the forest. I don't know if that's healthy or not. Well, they're not healthy to drink. That's why my water's triple filtered, essentially. Well, one of the things is a triple filter. 5 times filtered. I filter the hell out of my water. So the water's stored in these 3 barrels. What happens then? It goes under the house. And now I have to crawl under the house. Here we are under the house. There's the PEX tube. First, it runs into the pre-filter, which filters out the big chunks. Then it goes into this 12-volt water pump. Then from there, it goes into that little tiny pressurized tank. If you don't have that thing on, like I didn't for a long time, whenever you run the water kind of low, it goes jud, 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 jud. I like bands that go jud, 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 but I don't like when my water goes jud, 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 jud. It then connects over to go both inside my house, and then also it goes to my shower. Okay, let's talk about the shower. This little buddy, hello little gigantic buddy, it's called a dark fishing spider, and I don't like that it hangs out near my shower. What you have here is a propane water heater. And these are great. You cannot use these inside. Do not use these inside. They vent all the poison air out. I built a little roof on mine so that the rain doesn't get in. I made the spider upset. Please don't get mad at me, spider. I have a calm and nervous truce with all of the spiders and wasps around here. Unlike the poison ivy and I are at war. It is a war of extermination. Water goes in, hot water comes out. Oh, another spider. Water comes out, and you can see the temperature. It's going up because the water's getting hotter. I'm gonna build a nicer shower. It's gonna be over here. I haven't built it yet. Now we go inside the house. This is the first time I've let anyone see inside my house. There's my sink. You think I would have cleaned it first. It's always this clean. My house is always this clean. Here's the water. Water comes out. It even has one of these little doohickeys. What's happening is, well, it's really simple. The pressurized water comes in the house and it goes in the sink. There are 3 different stages of water filtration I use. One is just the screen that's in line that I showed you before under the house. And the next one, the most important one, is this little buddy down there. That little buddy is a water filter. It's an under-sink water filter, and you can look through, there's a lot of different types. Because I'm paranoid, and because I don't take incredibly good care of my water barrels, I also then use one of these little buddies. My system eventually drains, comes out from under the house, and runs into my yard. That's water. Now let's talk about power. Power is extra fun because right now, my solar panels all washed away in a flood. Normally, the way that I have my power set up, and the way that I guess I would recommend, is primarily solar stored in a battery with a generator as backup. As you may have noticed, I don't get a ton of sun in the summer because I'm in the woods. And trees, deciduous trees, they have leaves in the summer. There's a fun thing about solar panels where they make DC electricity. You know the band AC/DC? Well, it's not just a terrible band. It's types of power. AC power is what you have at home. It's alternating current. Direct current is the other kind, DC. And DC is actually a little bit less terrifying to learn how to be an electrician on, or at least that's the only thing I know how to electricianify. Solar panels make DC power. The biggest downside of DC power is it does not like to travel. So you have to do all kinds of shit where you up the voltage and then send it over really thick, stupidly expensive electrical wire. These electrical wires, the positive and the negative, they run all the way down to the field down below where they get swept away by the flood. I guess that's not how it's supposed to go. Then they come inside the house and they come into this jumbled mess of wires. The basic idea is that you have a solar charge controller, tink, which takes the power, and you can't just hook a solar panel into a battery because batteries are finicky and they need to be charged at certain voltages, certain amounts, certain lengths of time, all of this stuff. This figures that out, and then it brings it out into my battery. I'm currently using this gigantic, 150-pound lithium battery. This is an industrial battery that is like past its prime, so they sold it to me for reasonably cheap. Over there is what more people have and what I had for a long time, which is a 24-volt regular battery, AGM battery instead of lithium. Lithium is substantially more expensive unless you get it weird and used. There's all kinds of more to know about electricity. I could accidentally talk about solar for the next 30 minutes, but I'm not going to. So it goes into this thing, and then it comes out from there, and it charges my house. There's lights, there's a fan up there, there's a refrigerator. In order to get your AC power, you use one of these inverters. It's the thing with the light on it. There. Don't watch this video and decide you know how to run solar. The next thing it goes into, this steps it back from 24 volt, which is my DC system, to 12 volt, because 12 volt is what all of the like RV stuff and my water pump and my fridge and my lights and all of that stuff is wired to work on. So it has to go into there, It goes into all these like a little electrics over in the darkness. Goes into this fuse block. Fuses are very important. Don't unfuse your house or you will not have a house or a forest. Okay, that's the like big fancy version of, well, the medium fancy version of how to have solar. The way that most people in like a smaller off-grid setup, like your car or your van or your tiny shack like this one, but you don't work on a computer for a living, or if you do, you go to town because it's not a pandemic. You use something called a solar generator. This is a little tiny solar generator. And what it is you can plug in a solar panel, but not very much solar panel. And it stores electricity because it's a battery. And then it gives you power in 12 volt or AC. Let's talk about internet. I use the internet. You probably picked up on that. Where I live, there is not a lot of cell service, so I use something called a signal booster. There is an antenna. Hello, antenna. That is a cell phone antenna. It runs a wire down the house, through the floor, and then inside the other part of the floor, back into the mess of wires. A little green light that you probably can't even see is the signal booster. The signal booster then, because nothing is simple, runs a wire to the other part of the signal booster. Why is it facing the wall? Because it has to face the opposite direction as the other part of the signal booster. Why? I don't know. I have no idea. So the best cell phone reception in the house is here. Off-grid internet is hard to come by. Actually, rural internet, doesn't matter if you're off-grid, is hard to come by. People don't quite realize how big the digital divide is in the United States, but it is a big divide. Let's talk about ventilation. I know that's what you were thinking. You were thinking, man, I hope Margaret talks about ventilation. Like, of all my questions about off-grid life, I think about humidity the most. No one thinks that until you live off-grid in the South, and then that's all you think about. That's why my bangs are curling, even though I have hairspray in them. Humidity, it's actually really low today. Today, it's only 73. That's 20% lower than it's been for the past month. It's been 93% humidity. There's two ways to dehumidify a house or to keep the house from molding, and they run counter to each other. And people all the time are like, oh, you should get desiccants. They don't know the word desiccant, but they tell me that I should get these things. These things absorb moisture from the air, and then you can refresh them by heating them up. These things are great for like a safe or a closet. But you basically have to make a choice. You have to make a choice in your structure about whether you're sealing it and dehumidifying it or whether you're focusing on ventilation. And if you're focusing on ventilation and maximizing airflow, then you can help fight some of the like mildew problems, right? But you're not going to be able to get the humidity down, because if you run a dehumidifier or use desiccants, you're just trying to dehumidify the South, which I don't know if you've met the South. The South does not want to dehumidify. The way that I do it is I have a window that I always leave open in the back. I make sure I use a screen door, and my front door is always open. And then there are vents at the top of the house. That one behind me, hello, it's over there, is running a 12 volt fan all of the time. The one on the other side is not, because I haven't wired a 12 volt fan to that side yet. I also keep a battery powered fan aimed at my bed. This is my bed. I like it. Next, the stove, the sink area. This is currently a work in progress. I'm in the middle of tiling. I had to rip out the whole thing and rebuild it because of mildew. After trying a lot of different things, I like these small sort of RV-sized stovetops. Heats right up, just like at home. I am at home. That uses AC power from my inverter in order to use the electric start. You can also light it with a lighter. It's not a big deal. Never store your propane inside. That is like the golden rule of propane. I keep my propane out on the porch. During the summer, I have my stove propane and my shower propane. During the winter, I also use a propane heater and keep a third tank out. The stove propane, it lasts me at least half a year, maybe a year. Shower, same, a 20-pound tank will last me forever. not actually forever. During the winter, heating with propane, even this 12 by 12 space, takes about a 20-pound tank every week or so, which actually works out to be about $10 a tank because I get mine refilled. It would be $20 a tank at the gas station, and $10 a week, $40 a month is not bad for heating. So let's talk about living. Tiny homes are overrated, much like off-grid life. Tiny homes, crazy overrated. You have to figure out where everything goes. So you do a lot of maximizing the space. This is the ladder up to the loft. It is also my standing desk. It's so crowded in here that I strapped some of my instruments to the ceiling. This is my goblin bass. Over here I have a kantele. That's the Finnish. And a frame drum I built. Here's a mountain dulcimer I built. It is currently destroyed by humidity. Here's a bowed psaltery. You knew I was going to talk about my instruments. If you've met me before, you knew that this is all just secretly so I could show off all my instruments. A lot of like strong and mixed feelings about my house right now because I've been in it for 2 years now. I mean, longer than that, living in it, but for 2 years, just in pandemic times. It's a lot. It's a lot to be in a tiny space. But on the other hand, here's the view out the back window. Here's the view out the front. So I guess I don't hate it. Okay, I think this part's cool. A little projector. A little projector screen. I've also built into my house a couple 12-volt outlets, USB outlets. And I've run extension cords to different parts of the house to have AC power as well. I wired all my lights into 12-volt switches, set on dimmers. There's one course of overhead lights for the front and one course for the back. And then the most complicated one I did, which I'm really excited about, is this switch or that switch up there turns on and off the lights up there. Something I've learned the hard way is that morale matters and quality of life stuff matters. It's completely possible to go months, even years, without any of the amenities, without easy access to a hot water for shower, or, having to step on a foot pump in order to pump all your water in order to drink, or having to haul your water in 5-gallon jugs. It's possible to live that way, but it grates on you, and the more quality of life improvements I've been able to make, the better the quality of my life. But part of that quality of life is living somewhere beautiful, and this is one of the cheapest ways to live somewhere beautiful. Squatting is a really good, even cheaper way to live beautiful places. Not that I would ever recommend that anyone break the law in the middle of a massive crisis of there being incredible numbers of empty houses and incredible numbers of people who are without houses. Obviously, that would be immoral for people to recommend that. This is how I spend about 10 hours, at least, of my days for the past 2 years. Okay, let's talk about pest control. Pest control inside has 2 steps. Step 1, flypaper. Step 2, you make friends with the spiders. All spiders must be smaller than this mirror or will be denied entry. I think YouTubers, instead of sitting in their trucks, they should sit in their hammocks. I feel like the world would be a better place. That's where everyone YouTubed from. So there is a lot about off-grid life that I think teaches people about preparedness and about resiliency and the need for community. Even where I live, so alone in the woods or whatever, I have community around me and can borrow tools, and I can borrow know-how and run things past people, and I'm endlessly appreciative of that. But it's also taught me to realize that every resource is limited. If I burn the propane, I don't have the propane anymore. If I run the generator, I don't have the gasoline or propane anymore. If I use all the water, then I don't have water until I go get more water. And I think that that's good. I think that more people should not necessarily experience scarcity, but recognize the scarcity implicit in the things that they already use. I also appreciate the slowness of it. Sometimes I just go outside and I listen to the birds and the bugs. And when there aren't too many of them and they're not everywhere, it's really nice. It's really beautiful. So I think that there is a lot to recommend. There's a whole ecosystem of people who try and sell you this. They try and sell you this in two ways. First, they try and like sell you on it, like, oh, this is what you're going to do. And they try and like sell you the things to do it. But more than that, they try to sell you on the romanticization of it. They want you living in your regular house to dream about this life that you could lead if only blah, 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 blah. If only something was different in your life. If only you had access to a different thing. If you had a different job. If you didn't have a job. If you had a different family. If you didn't have a family. And escapism is great, and romanticizing things is absolutely necessary. I do romanticize aspects of my life. I love that my house is beautiful. It's tiny, but it's beautiful, and I built it exactly the way I wanted it. And I think it's okay to romanticize things that we live through, especially the things that we have to live through. If this is what I have available to me, then I should romanticize it, because otherwise the fact that it's like full of bugs and mold and, you know, there's spiders everywhere and everything is always falling apart and I have to fix it all the time. Otherwise it would get me down. But instead I romanticize it. And before this I lived in a van and I romanticized that. Not because it was good to live in a van, it was terrible to live in a van. I hated the hashtag van life world because it didn't reflect the experience of me or anyone else I knew who lived in a vehicle. And tiny house life is the same thing. I don't refer to this as a tiny house, I refer to it as a cabin. Why? It's a tiny house, but it's a cabin. And the reason I call it that is because I hate the romanticization of that. Yet, it's also necessary. Otherwise, we're just living hard lives. If we can't romanticize what's hard about our life, what's the point? It's weird when other people romanticize what's hard about your life. And so in some ways it's weird to play into that by making videos like this. But I try to remember that escape also has a value. Like, escapism also has a value. You know, thinking, oh, I would go live this way if only, actually sometimes provides a necessary, like, pressure release for people who are living the best they can, doing the best they can. And so I try to be aware of that. And I do that about other lifestyles, to be sure. Hell, I do it about lifestyles I used to have. I miss playing accordion on the street. I miss living in a van. I hated living in a van. So many health problems from living in a van. Could never stand up straight inside my own house. Anyway, I clearly fell off the joke train and into the introspection train. Let me talk really quickly about backup. This is my backup power. In the winter, I sometimes have to run this generator, which also runs in and charges my battery through a separate battery charger. You can't just plug it into the same one that the solar goes into. I run this in order to keep my batteries topped off when the sun is not providing, whether it's too rainy or the sun's been too low, it goes behind the hills too early. The advantage of a generator that runs on both propane and gasoline is that gasoline is cheaper. So if you're using a generator a lot, gasoline's a fair amount cheaper way to do it. Propane, however, stores indefinitely. Gasoline only stores for a year or two. People argue about this all the time. If you ever want to watch people argue about things that they actually all kind of know about, but they have completely different opinions, read about the shelf life of gasoline. It's so much fun. Maybe you have a different idea of fun than I do. Some other questions I get a lot. Margaret, why did you paint your house black? Won't that make it too hot? No, it doesn't. What do you do with trash? The same thing you do with trash. I live about a little bit more than a quarter mile away from the parking lot and up about the equivalent of maybe 5-floor walk up. I have to haul all the trash out, and it makes me more aware of how much I use. How do you do laundry? Well, there's two different means. When it's not 90% humidity all the time, I use a hand drying system, which I'll cut away to now. This is a hand crank washing machine. Woo! Basically, you fill it up with clothes, and water, hot water, maybe, depending on what you're trying to do, and soap. Close it. You spin it a lot. I'm not gonna. And then all the stuff comes out because you didn't close it properly. And then you spin it, and then you rinse it, and then you do that until your clothes are clean, and then you put them on a laundry line. It's actually really easy. Anywhere except the South in the summer, in the forest. Building in the forest felt really smart the first summer when I was like, haha, it stays cool up here. And then it didn't feel as smart once I realized that the humidity doesn't drop when you're in the forest because the sun can't get to it and dry up all the rain. The itsy bitsy spider can never go up the spout again. Who says again? When it's too hard to do that, I take my laundry into town and I do it at your house. Thanks. For a little while I hand washed my clothes in the river. I felt very trad wife. I would like put on a white dress and walk down to the river and then use a washboard and wash my clothes. It's so annoying. It's all so annoying. I wish I had a washer and dryer because the humidity is trying to destroy me. It's succeeding. These are the wasps. They're my friends. How did I build my house? This is actually the question I get the most, probably. I built my house by looking at a combination of different books that talk about how to build cabins, including a bunch that talk about building A-frames, and then looking at a lot of different blogs of people who've built A-frames on the internet. The basic idea of an A-frame is that you have a platform on a foundation. In the front, there are these posts, and these posts are cement posts that go deep into the ground. Because I built on a hill, that means that, well, in this case, I dug out a certain chunk of it flat, about the back half of it flat. These are on-grade foundations. I use these cement blocks in the middle. You use huge foundation boards. I believe these are like 2x12. After you build the platform, first on it goes like a baseboard. I forget what this is called. And then the rafters go onto that. I use 16-foot rafters on the 12-foot base, which is how I got it so pointy. I wanted it pointy, and I'm glad I did because it means a lot more room for the loft. And slightly more vertical walls inside, which means slightly better storage capacity. The rafters themselves, you can see inside the house. I put blocking between all of the different rafters, which means that the rafters are kept spaced apart by non-structural pieces of wood. Then you sheathe the rafters. The rafters are actually all of the load bearing of an A-frame. This entire wall doesn't hold up the house at all, which is what allowed me to do my completely non-structural, I made up how to make windows thing. It's all dimensional lumber with plywood sheathing on the outside, fiberglass insulation on the inside, house wrap on the outside, and then in this case I use beadboard. Beadboard pretends to be planks, but it's actually basically pieces of plywood. I was never someone who was like, I could build a house. The fanciest piece of furniture I'd ever built was a bookshelf and a queen-size bed. I once built a queen-size bed out of 2x4s. And then I built a house. And I watched a lot of videos about how to use the different tools, and I just did it. The biggest downside of an A-frame is that every piece of furniture in here has to be custom made. Also, there's a cricket inside my house. I don't know if you can hear that. I think it's in the walls. So if you like this video, please tell people about the channel. Please tell people about, I also make a podcast called Live Like the World is Dying, which is the same name as this YouTube show. And word of mouth is the main way that people find my content. Of course, the algorithm will feed it to people, and the algorithm will feed it to people who probably don't like me. But the algorithm will feed it to more people if you like and comment and subscribe and do all of those things. And I don't know, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them down below. If you have opinions about what I did wrong, I guess you could tell me, but I probably already know or disagree with you. But if you let people know about the channel, then more people will see the channel, and then I'll have more impetus to make more videos. And if you want to support the show more directly, you can do so by supporting me on Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/MargaretKilljoy. And I put most of my content out for free, but there's also like zines and things like that that are behind a paywall on Patreon. And I actually hate paywalls. And so if you live off of less money than I make on Patreon, please just message me and I'll give you access to all my content for free. I also have a book coming out. AK Press is reissuing my anarchist utopian book, A Country of Ghosts, this fall being 2021. And you should check it out if you like utopia and don't like government or capitalism. And if you think you dislike capitalism but like government, or you think you hate government but like capitalism, you should read the book anyway, because maybe you'll find out that actually the two are completely intertwined. And if you hate one, you should really think about hating the other. That's completely unrelated. Feel free to subscribe for more content about whatever the hell I feel like posting about, mostly survival and preparation stuff. Thanks so much. I hope you're doing as well as you can.